In 2019, a police department received a letter confessing in detail to a murder that had gone unsolved since 1979. The confession was thorough, accurate, full of things only the killer could have known. It should have closed a 40-year-old case. Instead, it opened a new one, because of the postmark. The letter had been mailed 40 years earlier, in 1979, 3 days after the murder. It had simply taken 40 years to arrive. Stay with me. The post office has no explanation, and neither does anyone else. The murder was of a man named Calvin Ross, found in his home in the fall of 1979. There were no witnesses, no clear motive, no useful evidence, and after a year the case went cold and stayed cold for 4 decades, the kind of case a department keeps in a box and takes down once a year to confirm there is still nothing new. The letter changed that. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, addressed to the police department in careful handwriting, and inside was a full confession. The writer described the night of Calvin Ross's death in precise detail. He named the room. He described the weather. He mentioned an object taken from the house that had never been made public, a small brass clock, whose absence only the investigators and the killer could have known about. Everything in the letter was correct. It was, without question, written by someone who had been in that house the night Calvin Ross died. The detective who read it first assumed it was a deathbed confession, an old man unburdening himself before the end, and turned the envelope over to find a return address. There was none. But there was a postmark. And the postmark read October of 1979, stamped by a post office in the same town, dated 3 days after the murder. He assumed it was a mistake, an old stamp, a prank. So he sent the letter to be examined, and the examination made it worse. The paper was period paper, aged 40 years, genuinely. The ink had oxidized the way ink does over 4 decades, not the way fresh ink pretends to. The stamp was a real 1979 stamp, cancelled with a real 1979 cancellation mark from a post office that had closed in 1994. Every physical test agreed, the letter had been written and mailed in 1979, 3 days after Calvin Ross was murdered, and had spent 40 years somewhere between the mailbox and the department before arriving in 2019. The post office had no record of it, which meant nothing, because they keep no records of ordinary mail that long. But they also had no explanation. Letters are delayed by weeks, sometimes, found behind a sorting machine or in a flood-damaged bag. 40 years is not a delay. 40 years is not a category the Postal Service has. A letter mailed in 1979 does not arrive in 2019. It is lost, or destroyed, or it arrives in 1979. It does not wait. The detective tried to identify the writer from the handwriting, and here the case took its last turn. The department still had, in the old file, samples of handwriting from the people questioned in 1979. And the confession matched one of them, a man who had been interviewed as a minor witness, cleared, and forgotten. His name was Earl Manning. He had died in 1981, 2 years after the murder, in a car accident. He had been dead for 38 years when his confession arrived. So the letter had been written by a man who died in 1981, mailed 3 days after a murder in 1979, and delivered in 2019. 2 of those facts could each be explained alone. Earl Manning could have written it and mailed it in 1979 and it could have been lost. Or someone could have forged it recently. But the forgery theory breaks on the aged paper and the genuine 1979 cancellation, and the lost letter theory breaks on 40 years the Postal Service cannot account for, and both theories break on the simple fact that the man who wrote it had been in the ground since 1981 and could not have mailed anything after that. The case is closed now, officially, on the strength of the confession, because the confession is accurate and there is no one left to prosecute. Calvin Ross's murder is solved. But the detective who received the letter kept a copy, and he told a colleague the part that stays with him, the part that is not in any report. The letter ends with a line that is not a confession at all. After describing everything he did, Earl Manning wrote one last sentence. He wrote, "I am sorry this will reach you so late, I have been trying to send it for a very long time. And then he signed his name, in 1979, in a hand that would be still and dead within 2 years, and dropped it into a mailbox, where it waited 40 years to say it was sorry for being late.